I was at the park with my son when I found a lost little girl. She said she lived in the house with the lilacs. I knew that house. It was my late wife's childhood home. When I walked the girl to the door, I froze. The woman who answered was my wife, who had died a year ago. This is a story about a coincidence so incredible, it felt like fate. Before we begin, I have a quick question for you. What's your favorite season of the year? Share it in the comments and subscribe for more daily stories. Now, let's return to that park. For the past year, my life has felt like a ghost story. I live surrounded by memories of my late wife, Serafina. Her presence lingers in the half-empty closet, in the scent of her vanilla candle I still can't throw away. But the strongest reminder is the one I see every day in our son Theo. He has her eyes, the same bright green, and her smile, a perfect bittersweet echo of something I thought I'd never experience again. He's 7 years old, my brave, quiet boy. I'm trying to be both mother and father to him, a role I feel deeply unprepared for. Sarah was the sun of our small, happy world. I was just a steady planet orbiting her light. Now the sun is gone, and we are two small, cold planets drifting in the quiet dark. On this particular Saturday afternoon, under a bright, almost cheerful autumn sky, I took Theo to the city's largest park. It's a place filled with our memories, where Sarah and I had our first date, where we married under the branches of an old oak tree. But it's also a place full of life, where a 7-year-old can run, climb, and forget, for a moment, the quiet sadness of home. I was sitting on a bench watching Theo play on the swings when I saw her. She was a little girl, about Theo's age, with a wild mane of dark curls, standing alone near the entrance to the park's wooded trail. She was crying, not with loud sobs, but with the quiet, frightened tears of a child who is truly lost. My heart, something I thought had gone numb, ached for her. I walked over, Theo trailing curiously behind me. "Hey there," I said softly. "Are you lost? Are you looking for your mom or dad?" She looked up, her eyes a familiar green, wide with fear. She just nodded, a single tear cutting through the dirt on her cheek. For the next 20 minutes, I felt a calm, focused purpose I hadn't known in a long time. I wasn't a grieving husband. I was a father, a protector. I asked her name. "Willow," she whispered. I asked if she knew her address or her parents' number. She shook her head, trembling. "It's okay," I said gently. "We still find them. Do you remember anything about your house?" She thought hard, brow furrowed. Then her face brightened with a single clear memory. "My house is the one with the big purple lilac bush by the front door, the one that smells like vanilla." The world seemed to stop. Playground laughter, distant traffic, rustling leaves, all faded to a dull roar. The house with lilacs and vanilla wasn't just a description, it was a memory. It was a line from the story my wife had told me countless times about her childhood home. It was a coincidence, strange, impossible, and heartbreakingly beautiful. In a life stripped of magic for so long, it was one I couldn't ignore. I looked at the lost girl, and a wild idea formed. "You know what, Willow?" I said, my voice strangely hopeful. "I think I know where that is." Driving across town felt like unlocking a sealed part of my heart. It was a drive into Sarah's old neighborhood, a place I hadn't visited since her funeral. My mind wavered between logic and a desperate hope. "It's just coincidence," reason argued. "Lots of houses have lilac bushes. You set a grieving man seeing ghosts." But another voice whispered, "What if?" In the back seat, Theo and Willow were having a quiet conversation. Now that she felt safe, Willow opened up. Her small voice carried unsettling familiarity. "How did you get separated from your mom?" I heard Theo ask. "Our puppy Daisy saw a big squirrel and ran into the woods," she said. "Mommy told me to stay on the bench and she'd be right back. But then a band started playing loud music. A big crowd came and I couldn't see her anymore. I waited and got scared, so I started walking. Then she dropped her voice. I was lost." It was such a simple, believable story, something that happens in parks every day. But every detail she shared rang strangely familiar. "I love to draw," she told Theo. "My mommy says I have my mother's hands," an unusual phrase for a 6-year-old. She spoke of her love for yellow, her dislike of broccoli, her habit of singing made-up songs to her puppy. Each small detail mirrored my lost Sarah. I felt like I was dreaming, a beautiful, unsettling waking dream. Finally, we turned onto her old street, a quiet, tree-lined avenue of houses I knew from Sarah's family photos. I drove slowly, heart pounding. I was about to ask Willow if she recognized anything when she suddenly leaned forward, pressing her small hand against my seat, and pointed. Her voice was pure, joyful recognition. "There it is," she cried, bouncing in her seat. "That's my house. I told you, the one with the lilacs." I braked hard. The car groaned. I stared at the house she was pointing to, a beautiful 2-story Victorian with a wraparound porch and a huge, familiar lilac bush. It was the house I'd picked Sarah up from on our first date, the house where I met her parents, the house of my own most treasured memories. I'd been told it was sold years ago to strangers after her parents passed. My mind screamed it was impossible, a coincidence so huge it had to be a trick. But looking from the porch to the joyful little girl in my back seat, I knew I wasn't dreaming. I was about to knock on a door that led straight into the heart of a ghost story, and I had a terrible, wonderful feeling that the ghost was about to answer. I pulled over to the curb, the engine idling, a quiet rhythm against the frantic beating of my heart. I stared at the house. It was as familiar to me as my own, yet I had avoided even driving past it for over a year. This was where I had picked Sarah up for our first date, her smiling face framed in that same doorway. It was a house of memories, of ghosts, and now a place of an impossible and deeply unsettling mystery. "Come on, Daddy," Theo said, his voice carrying a child's simple impatience, pulling me from my thoughts. Willow Sepp's home. I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady as if I were walking through a dream. The 2 children, my son and the strangely familiar little girl, scrambled out of the back seat and ran ahead. I followed along the familiar stone path like someone on autopilot, my mind a chaos of logic mixed with an undeniable sense of fate. The air was heavy with the scent of the old lilac bush by the porch, just as Sarah had described it, a sweet, thick perfume that somehow smelled of vanilla. Willow, excited to be home, raced up the steps and pressed the doorbell. Its cheerful chime echoed from a life I thought had ended long ago. The door opened, and time seemed to stop. It wasn't someone who merely resembled my late wife. It was her. Sarah stood in the doorway, her expression warm with maternal concern, her green eyes the same bright shade as Theo's, and her smile with its familiar tilt of the head were unmistakable. The only change was her haircut, a short, modern bob instead of the long waves I remembered. But it was her. It was an impossible and deeply cruel miracle. My heart and mind felt as though they had shattered into pieces. I was staring at what I thought was a ghost, frozen on the path, unable to move or breathe. But the children weren't set frozen. "Mommy," Willow cried with pure relief and ran past me, wrapping her arms around the woman's legs. Theo, who had been clutching my hand, let go. He looked at the woman's face, the face he had only seen in photographs around our quiet home, with the simple, heartbreaking logic of a 7-year-old boy. Presented with something miraculous, he whispered, "Mommy," his voice trembling with impossible hope. He too ran forward, clinging to the other side of her dress, burying his tear-streaked face in the fabric. The woman, this living image of my wife, looked stunned. She glanced from her own daughter to the boy now calling her mommy. Then her eyes, so familiar yet confused, lifted to mine. She saw me, saw Theo, and I'm sure she saw herself reflected in our faces. 2 strangers on her porch, looking at her as though she'd returned from the dead. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. This wasn't just a ghost. This was a living impossibility. I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing my grip on reality. The woman looked at me, her face mirroring my own shock, but also holding a dawning suspicion. "I don't know who you are," she said softly, her voice strangely familiar. "But you are looking at me like you said seen a ghost. Sarah, I whispered, the name catching in my throat. Her eyes, my late wife's eyes, filled with a terrible pity. I don't know who Sarah is, she said gently. My name is Rosalind. She looked from my stunned face to my son still clinging to her and made a quiet decision. Please, she said, come inside. We have a lot to talk about. I stepped into my late wife's childhood home for the first time, feeling as if I were outside my own body. The furniture and photos were different, images of a family I didn't know, but the house itself, the layout, the scent of old wood and beeswax was exactly as Sarah had described it. I was a stranger in a place that felt impossibly like home. We sat in the sunlit living room. The children, Theo and Willow, sat silently at opposite ends of the sofa, staring at each other like two pieces of a puzzle from different boxes. We, the adults, began trying to assemble that puzzle. I told Rosalind my story. With a trembling hand, I showed her the photo I carried in my wallet. Me and Sarah on our wedding day, under the old oak tree in the park. She took it, her own hand shaking, and stared at her own face and smiled from a life she had never lived. Then she told me her story. She had been adopted as a baby, raised as an only child by a loving couple who had since passed away. She had never known her birth parents and had no reason to believe she wasn't alone in the world. We sat there in that quiet, sunlit room, a grieving widower and a woman confronting her own ghost, and the impossible truth began to take shape. We weren't crazy. We weren't dreaming. We were two halves of a single long-buried story. We have to know the truth, Rosalind said, her voice steady with new resolve. We have to know if your wife and I are really connected. And so the search began, a journey into the past, a quiet and often frustrating investigation. We started with their adoptions. Both were closed, sealed by the state's laws. We faced a wall of red tape, privacy rules designed to keep hidden the very secret we were desperate to uncover. For weeks, we dug through old records at the city archives. We hired a private investigator. We found nothing. The trail was cold, a ghost of a story nearly 30 years old. It felt hopeless. I began to believe we would never know, that the story of Sarah and Rosalind would remain a beautiful, tragic mystery. Then I remembered the box. It came back as a memory from a quiet conversation with Sarah years ago, a memory buried under grief. She had told me about a small hand-carved wooden memory box her adoptive mother gave her on her 18th birthday. She said it contained the truth of where I came from. Sarah had once told me, her eyes distant, but I never opened it. My life with my parents was all the truth I needed. The past felt too painful to face. That box was still in our attic, dusty, forgotten, and until this moment, unimportant. I looked at Rosalind, at my late wife's face, and felt a surge of new, almost frightening hope. The legal system had sealed their past. The paper trail had gone cold, but a mother's need to tell her daughter the truth might have survived. I had no idea what was in that box, but as I looked at my late wife's lost sister, I knew it was no longer just a box of old memories. It was a key, and I had to go home to find it. A memory, a small, seemingly trivial detail from a conversation long ago, had now become the most important clue in the world. The memory box. I looked at Rosalind, at my late wife's sister, her face filled with fragile, desperate hope. There might be something, I said, my voice trembling with sudden electric excitement. At my house, in the attic, a box her mother gave her. She never opened it. We left her home, a place filled with new and uncertain connections, and drove to mine, a place haunted by old and familiar grief. The drive across town felt like a sacred, silent pilgrimage. We were no longer just a man and a woman. We were partners on a quest, two detectives on the verge of uncovering the greatest mystery of our lives. My attic was a quiet, dusty museum of the past. It held the remnants of a life I had once shared with Sarah. Old furniture draped in white sheets, like sleeping giants, boxes of college books, our son Theo's baby clothes long outgrown, and there, hidden under a pile of old photo albums, was the box. Just as Sarah had described, a small hand-carved wooden box with a tarnished brass latch. It wasn't locked. I carried it downstairs, my hands trembling as if holding something sacred and possibly explosive. We sat on the living room floor. Theo and Willow played quietly in the corner with building blocks, a small, peaceful island of innocence. I placed the box on the coffee table. "Are you ready?" I whispered. Rosalind nodded. Her eyes, my wife's eyes, glistened with both hope and fear for what we might find. I took a deep breath and lifted the lid. Inside, the box was lined with faded blue velvet. Resting on top was a tiny pair of knitted baby booties, soft, pale yellow. Rosalind gasped softly and reached out, tracing the delicate threads. Beneath them were two small hospital bracelets, brittle with age. One read Baby Girl A, the other Baby Girl B. At the very bottom lay a single folded photograph. My hands shook as I opened it, and the truth hit us like a wave. Two newborn babies, identical in every way, wrapped in pink and blue hospital blankets, lying side by side in a single bassinet. With trembling fingers, I turned the photo over. On the back, in the familiar, elegant handwriting of Sarah Sip's adoptive mother, was an inscription: "My dearest Serafina and her sister Rosalind, August 14th, 1995. They told me it was for the best that you were separated. They said it would be less confusing if you never knew. I never believed them. A heart should never be divided in two. I pray that someday the universe brings you back together." I looked at Rosalind, my wife's sister, my son's new aunt, and in her tear-streaked face, I saw the entire story of both our lives. The search was over. The ghost had a name. The puzzle was complete. The impossible truth was real. And now began the harder, more beautiful task: stitching two families and two lifetimes into one. We sat there for a long time, the faded photograph between us, a fragile relic of what had been lost. The silence was heavy but not empty. It was filled with the echoes of two lives lived apart, of a sisterhood stolen before it ever began. We wept for the mother who made an impossible choice, for the two baby girls sent into the world alone, and for my Sarah, who had lived her entire life never knowing that the other half of her heart was out there. The weeks that followed were quiet, strange, and profoundly beautiful. Our two families, mine, grieving and broken, and Rosalind's, suddenly connected to a ghost, began slowly to blend. Rosalind and her daughter Willow became a constant, comforting presence in my once silent house. Theo and I found warmth and laughter again in hers, the house with the lilacs. We weren't just building a new future. We were carefully piecing together a shared past. Rosalind spent hours flipping through my photo albums, studying pictures of Sarah, the sister she never knew. She would trace Sarah Sip's face gently, whispering, "She had my smile." And I learned about Rosalind too, about the life Sarah might have had. A life lived in another city, with different parents, but the same quiet strength, the same love of art, and that same ridiculous sense of humor. Our children, Theo and Willow, became living proof of the miracle that had taken place. They were not just cousins, but in a way, half-siblings, bound by the DNA of two identical mothers. Their shared green eyes made them look so alike that the world saw them as brother and sister. And perhaps they were. Two halves of a single beautiful story finally made whole. A year has passed. I stand in a sunlit garden, the air rich with the scent of lilacs and vanilla. It's the garden of the house, with the lilacs, now ours, not just Rosalind's. It has become the heart of our new wonderful family. We stutter having a simple backyard barbecue. Rosalind planted a second lilac bush beside the old one for each of them, she told me, her eyes shining, so they can finally grow together. I watch Theo and Willow chasing each other through the grass, their laughter a song of healing, and I think of my wife, my Sarah. The ache of her absence will never fade, but it no longer feels lonely. It's a grief we share now, a memory that breathes inside this new family built from the pieces of the past. A year ago, I thought my life was a ghost story, a sad tale tale of love lost forever, but I was wrong. The universe, in its strange and compassionate way, didn't return my wife to me. It gave me something else, the other half of her heart. An extraordinary story of family secrets, loss, and a bond that survived a lifetime apart. What do you think of this incredible coincidence that brought these two families together? Let us know in the comments below. If this story moved you, please show your support by hitting the like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more touching stories every day. Tap the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.